What if I told you that having superpowers could be a curse, worse than any disability? That possessing one of the most devastating gifts in the universe could destroy everything you love, including your own soul? This is the terrifying reality of Eric Lenschier, a man who discovered his powers in the darkest place in human history and never escaped that darkness. At 10 years old, while watching his family brutally separated in Auschwitz, Eric not only lost his childhood, he awakened a force capable of bending metal and destroying civilizations. But here's the detail few realize. From that moment on, he never knew a single day of true peace. Every victory turned to tragedy, every person he loved became a target, and every attempt to build something better resulted in even greater destruction. Prepare to discover why being born as Magneto is literally living in hell, even as one of the most powerful mutants who ever lived. This isn't just a story about superpowers, it's about how trauma can shape a human being in ways no therapy can heal.
Imagine discovering you possess one of the most devastating powers in the universe at the age of 10, in the midst of one of humanity's greatest tragedies. This is the reality of Eric Lenschier, better known as Magneto. His story begins in Auschwitz, where a Jewish child watches his family being ripped from his arms by the Nazis. In this moment of absolute despair, something awakens within him. The metal gates of the concentration camp warp and tremble with an invisible force. This is the birth of the master of magnetism, forged in the purest pain a human being can experience. Eric's childhood ended at that moment. He didn't have the chance to discover his powers playing in the backyard or impressing his friends at school. His mutation emerged amidst horror, forever associated with trauma, loss, and survival. While other children learned math and literature, Eric learned that the world could be cruel beyond imagination, and that having power didn't necessarily mean having control over life's circumstances. Controlling magnetism may seem fascinating at first glance, but living with this power is a completely different experience. Eric quickly discovered that his powers responded to his emotions, especially anger and fear. A moment of anger could send all the metal utensils in a kitchen flying across the room. A heated argument could damage electronic equipment within a radius of several meters. The most challenging aspect wasn't the grand feats like building bridges or stopping projectiles in midair. It was dealing with the small details of everyday life. Opening a door with a metal handle required constant concentration to keep from ripping it out of place. Using cutlery during a meal became a meditative exercise. Even expressing genuine emotion became dangerous, as any metal object in the vicinity could become an unwitting weapon. Eric also faced the psychological burden of possessing a fundamentally destructive power. While other mutants could heal wounds or read minds, his primary ability was to manipulate and destroy. This shaped his view of the world and himself in profound and troubling ways. He began to see conflict and destruction as natural solutions to problems, simply because that was what his powers did best. The relationship between Eric and Charles Xavier represents one of the most fascinating and painful dynamics in the mutant narrative. They met as young adults, two brilliant men with completely opposite visions for the future of humanity and mutantkind. Charles saw the potential for peaceful coexistence, while Eric, scarred by his experience in the Holocaust, saw only the inevitable repetition of history. Their friendship was genuine, based on mutual respect and intellectual understanding. Charles represented everything Eric could have been under different circumstances: optimistic, hopeful, capable of believing in the best of human nature. For Eric, Charles was simultaneously his moral anchor and his greatest torment, a constant reminder that he had chosen a darker path. Their philosophical discussions stretched for hours, passionate debates about human nature, evolution, and the future of Earth. Charles argued for education and gradual integration, while Eric championed mutant superiority and the need for decisive action. Neither could fully convince the other, but both were deeply influenced by these conversations. What made the relationship even more complicated was Charles's telepathic ability. Eric could never be sure whether the feelings of friendship he felt were genuine or the result of subtle psychic influence. This fueled his paranoia and led him to develop technology to block telepaths, starting with the iconic helmet that became his trademark.
Eric's personal life was marked by tragedies that mirrored his childhood experiences. He started a family, had a wife and daughter, but his mutant nature and the enemies he had cultivated put his loved ones in constant danger. When his family was murdered due to his identity as Magneto, Eric relived the sense of utter loss he had felt at Auschwitz. Later discovering he had other children, Wanda, Pietro, and Lorna, brought both joy and a new source of pain. His children inherited not only mutant powers, but also deep trauma and emotional instability. Wanda developed severe mental health issues that led her to alter reality on a global scale. Pietro became impulsive and impatient due to his superspeed. Lorna inherited both his magnetic powers and his propensity for depression and extreme behavior. Eric found himself trapped in a cycle where his efforts to protect those he loved often put them in greater danger. His reputation as a mutant terrorist made anyone close to him a target. His children grew up without knowing him properly, and when they were finally reunited, their relationship was complicated by decades of absence and misunderstanding. Throughout his life, Eric repeatedly tried to build a safe future for mutant kind. Each attempt reflected his personal evolution and his changing understanding of what leadership and protection meant. Genosa represented his first major experiment in nation-building. There, he attempted to create a society where mutants could live free from human persecution, governing themselves according to their own principles. For a brief period, it seemed he had found the answer. Mutants from all over the world flocked to Genosa, building a prosperous and technologically advanced civilization. The destruction of Genosa by Sentinels was not just a political or military setback, it was the complete collapse of his optimistic worldview. Millions of mutants died in a matter of hours, including many who had trusted him to keep them safe. Eric experienced again the horror of witnessing the genocide of his people, this time knowing that his own decisions had contributed to the tragedy. After Genosa, Eric tried a different approach, joining the X-Men and attempting to work within the system he had so long fought against. He genuinely tried to embrace Charles's philosophy of peaceful coexistence and gradual change. During this time, he taught young mutants, participated in rescue missions, and attempted to be the mentor he had never had. The establishment of Krakoa as a mutant nation represented perhaps Eric's greatest achievement, but also his greatest psychological test. This time, he was not the sole leader, but part of a council that included Charles and other influential mutants. For the first time in decades, mutants not only had a safe home, but also real political power on the world stage. Krakoa offered something Eric had never experienced, the possibility of ultimate victory. Mutants were respected, feared, and, most importantly, left alone to develop their own culture and society. He could walk the streets of his nation without worrying about sentinels, hostile politicians, or violent mobs. However, this peace also brought new challenges. Krakoa's internal politics were complex, rife with rival factions and hidden agendas. Eric discovered that governing a nation was very different from leading a revolution. Life-saving decisions could also compromise moral principles. Necessary alliances often involved compromises with former enemies.
The fundamental tragedy of Eric Lenscher is that he is a man forged by war who constantly seeks peace, but whose skills and experiences prepare him only for conflict. Each victory is temporary. Each period of tranquility merely a prelude to the next crisis. He has become an expert in survival, but has never learned to truly live in peacetime. His enemies see him as an existential threat that must be eliminated. His allies often fear him as much as they respect him. His children love him,
but they bear the scars of his absence and the consequences of his actions. Charles remains his closest friend and greatest source of guilt, a constant reminder of paths not taken and opportunities lost. Magneto's life is a study in how formative trauma can shape an individual in ways that persist throughout life. His experiences in Auschwitz not only awakened his mutant powers, but defined his fundamental understanding of power, protection, and the nature of humanity. He remains trapped between two worlds, not fully human due to his powers, but also not completely separated from humanity due to his origins and relationships. His story is that of a man constantly trying to right the wrongs of the past, but whose methods often perpetuate the very problems he seeks to solve. Ultimately, Magneto represents the fundamental question of whether it is possible to completely overcome a formative trauma or whether we are doomed to repeat it indefinitely. His journey continues because the answer to this question remains elusive, both for him and for those who follow his story. Eric Lehnsherr's tragedy lies not only in what he lost, but in what he never managed to become. A man forged by war in search of peace, but equipped only with tools of destruction. A father who wanted to protect his children, but ended up passing on to them the same traumas that haunted him. A leader who dreamed of a better world, but only knew how to build it on the rubble of the previous one. Magneto remains trapped in an eternal cycle, too powerful to ignore, too traumatized to find peace, too intelligent to accept simple solutions. He is the dark reflection of what any of us could become if our worst experiences completely defined who we are. But here's the question. Is it possible to break a cycle of trauma that stretches for decades? Or are we all doomed to repeat the patterns established in our darkest moments? If this in-depth psychological analysis has made you rethink everything you thought you knew about complex characters, you need to subscribe to the channel right now. Here we uncover the darkest and most fascinating layers of iconic characters everyone knows, but few truly understand. Sign in because every week I bring you a new psychological dissection that will completely change your perspective on heroes, villains, and everything in between. In the next video, we'll explore why being immortal like Wolverine is a psychological torture few could endure. And tell me in the comments, after learning Eric's true story, do you still see him as a villain or a victim? This promises to be an intense discussion. Did you enjoy the video? Then leave a like, which motivates me to continue bringing you this unique content. Until the next video, and remember, not all power is a blessing.